Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the state parties of the non-alignment movement and other state parties to the BTWC. NAM stresses that the national implementation of the Convention as required under Article 4 of the Convention requires commitments towards the implementation of all provisions of the Convention. There are diverse national situations for each of the state parties, but their commitments and obligations under the Convention are the same. Some state parties, especially developing countries, may require assistance and cooperation to strengthen their national capacities for the full implementation of all the provisions of the Convention. State parties which are in a position to provide assistance and cooperation to other state parties in capacity building to implement the Convention should do so if requested. NAM and other state parties to the BTWC underscore that the purpose of CBMs under the BTWC as agreed by the states at the second review conference and reconfirmed at subsequent review conferences is to prevent or reduce the occurrence of ambiguities, doubts and suspicions, and in order to improve international cooperation in the field of peaceful biological activities. CBMs are a tool of transparency and build trust and confidence among state parties in the implementation of the Convention. They cannot be a tool to assess compliance, for which the only method is legally binding mechanism with verification provisions. The group of NAM and other state parties to the BTWC believes that CBMs are a voluntary provisional tool of transparency in the implementation of the Convention until the adoption of a legally binding instrument with verification provisions. They cannot be a tool to assess compliance, for which the only method is a legally binding mechanism with verification provisions. The group emphasizes that CBMs shall, in full conformity with the decision made in previous review conferences, be dealt with under Article 5 and should be reflected in the factual report of this MX accordingly. NAM and other state parties would like to emphasize that all states are obliged to take measures for national implementation of the Convention by virtue of them being the parties to the Convention. They do so by enacting national laws, regulations, policies, and other measures and initiatives in accordance with their constitutional requirements. In an international legal instrument such as the BTWC, the assurance of compliance with the Convention provisions has to be undertaken collectively through appropriate multilateral verification arrangements. In the past, useful work has been done in this regard under the BTWC in the ad hoc group, and NAM continues to attach high importance to preserving, eventually resuming that work. The growing trends of various national implementation practices in the deficiency of the verification mechanism for BTWC have created different national levels of restrictions, barriers, and other limitations for legitimate trade and transfer of biological agents and toxins, equipment, materials, and related technology for peaceful purposes. Inadequate national implementation models intrinsically create obstacles for developing countries to manage their public health needs. Consequently, any national implementation measure should be in proportion to public health issues to facilitate but not hinder the fullest possible exchange for peaceful purposes in implementing Article 10. NAM and other state parties to the BTWC are of the firm belief that the state parties have the obligation towards the implementation of all provisions of the Convention. To this end, an appropriate mechanism is needed to ensure that laws and regulations of the state parties do not hinder international exchange and cooperation under Article 10 and allows this fullest possible exchange of equipment, materials and technology for peaceful purposes among state parties. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Je remercie.